Hello, everyone, and welcome to Boston Balling. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut. Hope you're all off to a fantastic start to the week. It actually looks really beautiful outside here with the snow. We got quite a bit of snow the other day. So it seems like winter is officially here, especially now with Christmas coming up. It's kind of nice to have some snow on the ground. So hope you're all enjoying yourselves. I am excited to bring you another episode of the show. Before I kind of get into that, I did want to just acknowledge some sad news in the sports world that did take place. College football coach Mike Leach passed away at 61, which is unfortunately, way too young, an absolute legend in the college football world. Really, paved his way when he was especially coaching at Texas Tech, kind of built up a legacy in the sport. And Mississippi State obviously is really mourning his death right now. So definitely sad time for the sports world in general, for sure. So my thoughts and prayers go out to the entire Mississippi State community and everyone who was close to him, because he definitely, he's definitely one to remember, and somebody who really made an impact in the sport. So so with that, though, I am excited to bring you another episode of the show. I have a really special guest with me on the episode. He is from the Providence Journal, does a lot of really good coverage of different sports. Bill Koch, how are you doing today?
Gabby, I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on my show. I really appreciate you hopping on here and joining.
No, it's my pleasure to make my debut. You got a really good thing going here, obviously. It is an interesting time in sports, and specifically to the Red Sox, of course. Just a word on Mike Leach off the top, which, you hit on. He's an original, guy who was one of a kind, and who was a winner at three jobs that you would not consider to be great jobs in college football: Texas Tech, Washington State, Mississippi State. None of those you would think would be in the top half of their respective conferences in a given year. So for him to have the success he did in his career, to be the innovator he was on offense, and to be the original character that he was, he is a great loss in that part of the sports world.
Absolutely. Yeah. He's definitely somebody who, you can't get a much more impressive resume than that, than he was able to rack up in his coaching career. So just definitely somebody who really made a mark on the sport, for sure.
Yeah, definitely did. If you look at the air raid offense that he introduced at Texas Tech, when he had Graham Harrell and Michael Crabtree, there are pieces of that throughout the sport now. It is essentially basketball on grass in some places. If you look at spread formations, multiple wide receivers on the field, no more fullbacks, empty backfields, quarterbacks attacking defensive backs in space, trying to play one-on-one. And some of those concepts now have made their way to the NFL, which, previously you didn't have a lot of overlap between college and pro football. So, just looking at what he was able to do over his career, he really influenced a lot of prominent people, prominent programs in the sport.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely really sad. I mean, even the news, when the news originally broke of him being in the hospital, nobody really knew what was going on. We all had hope, but it's just a really sad way that all unfolded.
Yeah, it was, and especially so close to the holidays. You feel for his family and obviously his players, because they're getting ready to play in a bowl game, and you lose your head coach, and college is already such an uncertain time for kids, and you add in a tragedy like that, and it's they're going to learn some really harsh lessons here over the next week or so in terms of grieving and what to do with sadness and loss, and you really feel for them specifically.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'll be pulling for them. It's definitely not going to be easy, but hopefully they leave it all out there for him in that bowl game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I appreciate you saying some words on that too. I know the entire sports community feels for him and for everybody. So definitely appreciate you speaking on that. I know you've, had a pretty successful career covering a lot of different sports. Can you just talk a little bit about kind of how you ended up where you are?
Sure. So I was a broadcast journalism major at BU, and I had a professor my junior year who said, you need to decide if you want to watch yourself for the next 35 years. And it took me about 5 minutes to realize I did not. I'd rather go into writing and production. And my first job that I was offered was a newspaper job in my hometown in Warwick. And I've been in newspapers for about, 21, 22 years now. 8 years with the Providence Journal, which is obviously the major daily in the state. And the great thing for me so far is that I've had a chance to do a little bit of everything, whether it's high schools, colleges, pros, NCAA tournaments, U.S. Opens, World Series, covered Olympic athletes on the way up, been exposed to a lot of different things. And for me, I guess my favorite has always been baseball. That's a sport I grew up with. It's a sport I played the most as a kid, but I'm generally a fan of anything that is played with passion, anything that people really care about, and it matters to people that you tell their story and, that you're there to observe what they do and do so well. So, for me, I just appreciate that every day and, appreciate every assignment I have, and try to do it in a similar way.
Yeah, I love that. And it's nice to be able to just do what you love and cover what you love and be able to also just get exposure to covering a lot of different sports too, because I feel like that's so important to be able to, have that opportunity.
Yeah, it's been great. Being in Providence, it's a great market because you're obviously so close to Boston. The Patriots have been so good over the last 2 decades. The Red Sox obviously winning 4 championships in that time. But we also get, in the offseason, you get college basketball. Providence is like a pro team here. URI's made 2 NCAA tournaments in the last 5 years. So you get exposed to higher levels of the sport. You get a good idea of how much is out there and how fun it can be when you're on those rides, at those regional games. And, it's a great market to work in, great market to be in. I've loved living here, working here, getting to know the people here. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm a huge college basketball fan myself. I actually grew up in Connecticut, so I'm a huge UConn fan.
Oh.
My grandfather growing up always had season tickets to UConn football and basketball games. And then my dad, after my grandfather passed away, my dad took over his basketball season tickets. And so we've just been a huge UConn basketball family forever. So college basketball is definitely up there as one of my favorites.
Yeah, and URI fans obviously saw what Dan Hurley did here. Winning an A-10 championship and winning an A-10 tournament. And there was no doubt that he was going to get UConn back to prominence in short order and has done so. This is his best team by far, I think, in his 5th season in Stores. Mm-hmm. What you really want to see is a breakthrough in March. And, you're going to, sort of watch the next 2 or 3 months and see how that group develops and how they mature. But that you've got a coach there who can run a program and ultimately, right now, UConn being in the top 3, you're right back to where you should be.
Yeah, they've had a couple impressive wins already against good teams. I think, it'll be interesting to see when they start playing teams in their conference and they start to really get tested because the Big East is no slump of a conference. There's a lot of good teams in the Big East this year. I think even the teams kind of that are at the bottom of the Big East are also not awful. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out when they do start to play other Big East teams. But I'm hoping this is more than a, first round exit in the March Madness tournament type of team.
Another loss.
I think that they can be.
Another loss to someone the likes of New Mexico State isn't going to go down well with UConn Nation. I know that.
Nope. Especially when it's a winnable game.
Yeah, very much so.
But yeah, we'll see what happens. College basketball is so fun. My dad and I we organize the March Madness pool and everything like that with friends and family every year. So that's always a good time too.
I wish I could say I was a winner more often, but I am not.
It's so hard to do it. One of my friends does it, but she doesn't really follow college basketball. She'll just pick teams just randomly if she likes the city that they play in, or like she likes the school's mascot, then she'll just pick them. And she won one year doing that. And it's just crazy. It's always people like that.
Of course she did. I mean, we have the running joke in the sports department. Who's going to win the NCAA pool? It's going to be Phyllis in accounting. She has no idea what's going on. we're like on Ken Palm looking like, all right, this team was, number 3 in offense and number 9 in defense. And the last 10 years, the national champion's been in the top 20 in defense. So you can't pick a team who's 47. And next thing you know, that team's out in the second round. Yep. Your second favorite's out, in the Sweet 16. And Phyllis in accounting is just dominating, has 3 of the final 4 teams, has the money in her pocket before the national championship game on the Monday night. And you're like, damn, really? Again, I was a donor. Why?
It's so true. It's so true. But that's what makes it so fun with all the upsets and everything. March is one of the best times of the year for that reason.
It's the best. It's one of the most unique sporting events that you'd ever hope to find. Just the anarchy that exists. I mean, you look at last year at St. Peter's and what they were able to do. School with a sub $40 million endowment that plays with a leaky gym and wooden bleachers, and they beat Kentucky and end up in the Elite Eight. That's the magic of that event.
Yeah, it's I was rooting for them last year because that was a cool story to just see them go as far as they did.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
You root for teams like that. If your favorite teams get knocked out early or your bracket's already busted anyway, you might as well just root for one of those teams.
You're doing it right. Absolutely.
But yeah, it's always a good time. But I know you mentioned that baseball, is kind of your favorite sport, which is the same with me. That is my number one too. I've always loved baseball, always loved the Red Sox. Obviously it's a bit of a frustrating time right now for them. People are getting just frustrated, rightfully so, with what's going on with the Red Sox right now, especially, with the departure of Xander Bogaerts. I think, generally the deal that the Padres gave him, I think was too long, in terms of the number of years that he got. So I wouldn't have wanted the Red Sox to match that. However, I do think if they had tried to handle this before he hit free agency and they tried to offer him maybe somewhere around the 5 to 6 year mark before he hit free agency, I think he would have taken that at that time.
I think that's probably where a lot of the hard feelings come from, Gabby. Is it feels like on some level this was preventable in some way before it actually fractured. 11 for 280 is not somewhere I would have gone either, to be fair. If I was the Red Sox, I wouldn't have necessarily felt comfortable going to that level, but it never had to get to that point in my mind. When you look at some of the reporting that was done in spring training, you look at what was put out by Alex Spear of the Boston Globe, the fact that the Red Sox offered 1 extra year at $30 million, which essentially brought Bogaerts to 4 for 90. Everyone knows that's well under his market value and what he was going to get in free agency. It just felt like such a waste of time. It felt like so many of the negotiations they'd had previously with John Lester or Mookie Betts or currently having with Rafael Devers. And you just wonder, and I often use this analogy, because when you sign a long-term contract with somebody, it's essentially a relationship. It's a marriage in a way. And I would say if you're going to propose to your partner at a certain point, are you going to offer them a ring that you hope they might accept? Are you going to offer them a ring that they'd be thrilled to accept and say, yes, I will marry you. I can't wait to commit to you for.
That's a good comparison.
For the rest of your life in that case. For contracts, it's for the next 6, 7, 8 years, whatever it may be. So I don't necessarily think that the Red Sox have put their best foot forward early enough, often enough. And I think that would be my general criticism of ownership and, obviously of Chaim Bloom acting on ownership's behalf.
Yeah, it's just definitely upsetting because obviously Xander Bogaerts was kind of the heart and soul of this Red Sox team. He's been there for so long, won 2 World Series with the team. And I just feel like he's somebody who fans really, really loved in Boston. And it almost sends a message that it's like, well, why should we even hope for the best when it comes to Devers? Because are they going to handle it the same way with him? Because Devers is the type of talent that you want to lock up. And I don't know how much I trust them to actually get something done with him, because as soon as he hits the free agent market, there's going to be a lot of teams all over that type of talent, rightfully so, because he's obviously, a really special talent to have. I just don't know if I really trust them right now based on how they handled the Bogaerts situation to to, go about it in the correct way with Devers. And I feel like with Bogaerts, he liked being in Boston. And I think if they, gave him the chances before he hit free agency, I think he would have been more inclined to stay if they offered him something respectable a lot earlier. Because I do think he enjoyed playing here. But for somebody, at his age, it would be dumb of him to turn down the 11 years that he got from the Padres. That was just, that's just too good to turn down for him. So I understand from his perspective why he did it, because he was doing what was best for him. But I just worry that it's going to be, the same situation all over again when it comes to Devers, because we've seen this before.
Yeah, why you're worried is because of a word that you used twice there, and that's trust. And I feel like that has been broken between the front office and Red Sox fans. And, to a lesser degree, the players, because obviously it's business for them and they take this much less personally than fans do. But you look at the Red Sox right now and you don't necessarily have certainty that they're going to act in good faith the way you would like them to act. And I think maybe in the past, if you look at Boston and the way that they've negotiated, whether it's with their own players or free agents, you look back specifically to very early in John Henry's tenure, you're paying, at the top of the market for good players. I go back to the 03 team. It loses in the ALCS, and you could draw a comparison to 2021 in this way. That team loses in the ALCS. They add a top starter in Curt Schilling and the top closer on the market in Keith Foulke. This team, going into 2022, stripped off their right fielder, still didn't address the bullpen concerns, still went forward without a clear plan at first base. They didn't add when they were 2 wins away from a World Series. It felt like they subtracted at the major league level. And so you look from the outside and you think, yes, this plan to build on concurrent tracks and to be sustainable over a long period of time, it's not clear enough for me. I don't necessarily see where this is going if I'm a fan. And I don't like the fact that not enough attention is being devoted to the major league roster in that way. I don't want to wait when I'm paying the highest average ticket price in baseball to go to Fenway Park. I don't want to go to Fenway with my family of 4 to see guys who I don't necessarily know or who I do know are not the best at their respective positions. And I think the Red Sox always made a pretty good faith attempt to give you that. And I think that trust between the fans and the front office, I think it has been frayed a little bit, over the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I just feel like, it's one thing to try to rebuild your farm system and collect some good prospects that you can, bring into your farm system, because that's important for the future, and also to even be used as trading pieces at some point as well. But there's only, there has to be a good balance of both of those, especially if you're a big market team like the Red Sox. It's not like they're in the situation Oakland is in, where they kind of do have to trade, these top players that they have, like how they just shipped out Sean Murphy and all these other, that if I'm Oakland, that is what you have to do. You have to just collect as many prospects as you can. But the Red Sox don't need to be in that situation. It was just really disappointing, even last offseason, how, they were 2 games away from going to the World Series, and then they just, they don't really do anything in the offseason to try to capitalize on that and be like, okay, this team really exceeded expectations in 2021, so they probably do have the potential to get to the World Series, and they almost treated it like, we maybe just got lucky. Like we just had a run. That's what it felt like the front office was saying, that like we just had a lucky run this year. This team is just not good enough yet. And it was just frustrating to see how, the bullpen was still an absolute nightmare this past season. And obviously the team had a lot of injuries, so that wasn't ideal. But even still, if everybody was fully healthy, I still don't know that they would have been a team that was a serious contender, because they really didn't go out and make a lot of the moves that I would have liked to see them make. And granted, I was saying, they have a lot of money off the books going into this offseason. So I was like, if they really want to spend, this is the time to do it. And now Chaim Bloom came out and said, we understand that fans would be upset. It's definitely understandable. Like, now we have to go and put out a team for them that can win baseball games. But I'm still not seeing, you know, from what I'm seeing, it doesn't seem like they're being super aggressive in terms of what they're trying to accomplish with the rest of this offseason. I mean, I know I saw something yesterday that Heim was saying they want another strong right-handed bat and they want to get a starting pitcher, but where are they going to get them from? Because, you know, every time I see a name that gets taken off the board, that's a solid talent. I'm like, well, that's somebody, that's one less free agent that they can go for. So now I'm just wondering, like, what is their actual plan? Because some people are like, well, they could just move Story to shortstop, which, yeah, I mean, that was his position before he came to the Red Sox, but that still doesn't solve the issue of like the blatant hole in the lineup now without Xander's presence. So I'm just kind of wondering exactly what their plan is for the rest of the offseason.
Yeah, a couple things there. Obviously, when you are involved at the top of the market, whether it's signing or trading for players, there is some risk there. It does involve some risk, and the Red Sox seem very risk averse. Not necessarily as ambitious as I would like a big market team to be. So you look at what's happened, maybe over the last 12, 18 months in baseball. Someone like Juan Soto is traded. The Red Sox aren't even mentioned in the market for Juan Soto. Aaron Judge signs with the Yankees. The Red Sox aren't connected to Aaron Judge in any way. Carlos Rodon is on the verge of signing a 6 or 7 year deal for, somewhere in the high hundreds, maybe creeping over 200. The Red Sox are mentioned with him, but do you really believe that they're going to give Carlos Rodon 7 for 210? I don't, because that doesn't jive with it doesn't jibe with what they've done, over the last 2 or 3 years. And so I think it's regrettable that they are not linked to these great players who they could bring in, whether it's by trade or on the free agent market. I don't think they were ever serious bidders for Sean Murphy in that way. And that's after Chaim Bloom said at the end of the year he'd like to upgrade the catching situation here. Well, Murphy has moved. Mike Zunino has signed. William Contreras has moved. Wilson Contreras has signed. The Red Sox weren't necessarily in on any of those players. And that's a position of need that they identified. That's not even to get into what's going to happen at shortstop, whether or not they're going to be involved with Swanson or Correa, how comfortable you feel about Story moving there when he's been a declining offensive player every year since 2019 and does spend time on the IL seemingly every year. Can you really count on him in that way to be a centerpiece of your lineup and a centerpiece of your defense? I'm not sure about that. They make a big bet on Yoshida coming over for Japan, offering him 5 for 90. If I look at Japanese hitters, according to Baseball Reference, there have only been 3 career who have had 10 wins above replacement, and they were all gods in Japan. You're talking Ichiro, Hideki Matsui, and Shohei Ohtani. And Yoshida, although he was regarded as a good player in Japan, I don't think he's necessarily on a pedestal with those 3. So what realistically can you expect in terms of him upgrading your lineup? Is he going to be your top offensive outfielder? Is he going to outperform Verdugo and Hernandez? He needs to. They need someone who can do that because their outfield last year was a bottom 10 group in baseball. You look at their last World Series team in 2018, they were top 5 group across the board in every outfield category, offense, defense, whatever you like. So that is a position of need as well. And I really hope that they don't look at that and think, well, we've signed Yoshida, we've addressed that. I don't think they have. And I look at shortstop and I think, I don't want them to say to me, well, we can move Story over and we've addressed that. And then we'll sign a second baseman to a 1 year deal or we'll play Christian Arroyo there. I don't consider that to be an upgrade where you can contend realistically into October. So I guess the big thing for me is I just need to see more ambition out of these guys. I need to see more involvement with elite players. I need to see a more outward, obvious attempt for them to get back toward the top of the AL East. And I don't know if we've seen that yet this offseason.
Yeah, with Yoshida, it was interesting you bring that up because when I saw that come across, I mean, obviously people are really hyping him up because of his offensive numbers in Japan, but that in itself is already a bigger risk than already proven major league players because you don't know how that's going to translate. So, like, to have them confidently say that they see him as an upgrade that could really be a piece to help them contend more. I mean, maybe, but like, how do we know? Nobody knows that for sure because he hasn't played in Major League Baseball yet. So I just thought that what they gave him was just, pretty risky in terms of what they're actually trying to do. Like, I feel like the money they spent on him, they could have used in other places to maybe get like a top-notch starter or be more in contention for somebody like Carlos Correa. I mean, obviously Carlos Correa would be like a dream for Red Sox fans, and he would be, I think, a really good fit in Boston. But I doubt the Red Sox are going to spend the money that he's going to want, to go somewhere, which is upsetting because he's somebody that I feel like could be really good in Boston, and he solves a number of problems that the Red Sox are having because he plays shortstop. He's a really good shortstop, and he can hit. And so I feel like he's somebody who what you're getting. If you were to sign him, I just don't see that. I just don't see that the Red Sox wanting to commit to somebody like that because they'll be like, well, we have Meyer who's going to be able to come up in a few years or whenever it's going to be. So we just need somebody that's going to be like a bridge guy. So why would we sign Correa? I feel like I think Dansby Swanson is more likely somebody that I see coming to the Red Sox in terms of what they are trying to do because they'd be like, he probably isn't going to be as expensive as Correa. And I feel like they're going to look at it and be like, well, he plays shortstop too. So that's fine for us.
Yeah, I think you read it correctly. I think they're perfectly happy operating in sort of that mid-level. But when you sort of get to the nosebleed level, the penthouse level, they're not necessarily as comfortable extending themselves in that way. And, that has very much become an organizational philosophy over the last, 5 or 6 years or so. And it is unfortunate in that way because if you look at teams who've won the World Series, over the last 10, 12 years, they've all had, with the exception of the Royals, they've all had a $150 million player on their team. Yeah. Right now, Story and Chris Sale are the two biggest contracts in Boston. They're both shy of that. Sale's at 145, Story's at 140. You need to pay guys at the top level. You need to pay them because of the consistency they give you, because of what they're able to give you in October, because they send a very clear message to the rest of your team. There is quality here. We are looking to win now. When you sign Carlos Correa, you're making a huge statement to the rest of your clubhouse. We expect to win right now.
Yes.
This guy is a premium player. He's been great in October. He has a ring. He's late 20s. We expect to grow with him even further. Oh, and by the way, he likes your manager a lot. They get along very well.
That's the whole thing too. Yeah, Cora likes Correa and Correa likes Cora.
And so they have a previous working relationship, obviously, and share a home, Puerto Rico, which, Cora has known Correa for a long time. He was a great player growing up. Someone who was a 1-1 draft pick, someone who was obviously ticketed for stardom from a very young age, and that's the type of guy who you want. I do think that out of those two, if they were going to sign one, Swanson would be the more likely. I do agree with you on that. I think you could probably get him for less years and less money. He is good defensively. What's he going to give you offensively? I don't necessarily know that. Another guy who was number one overall, there was certainly talent there, struggled early in his career with Arizona and then figured it out. And obviously with the Braves, he's been very good. But does he have the ceiling of Bogaerts in his best year? Does he have the ceiling of Correa in his best year? I don't think so. I think he's a little less than that. And the other point you made, and I think is a good one, is they still have other areas to worry about here. Whether it's starting pitching, whether it's starting pitching, are you all in on Tristan Casas at first base? Or are you concerned about his body and a couple injuries last year? And, the fact that Alex Cora comes out in the postseason and says, pretty much that Casas needs to get in better physical shape, that's a little scary. You wonder if that leads to him coming into camp looking great or him maybe struggling with his body a little bit and not necessarily picking it up right away. First base is such a premium position in terms of production. The Red Sox haven't had that, in 4 or 5 years, really. You have to go back to Mitch Moreland, and they had a little bit of a platoon going there, but it was veteran guys. It was guys who knew how to get it done. You had 2 months of Kyle Schwarber, obviously, who hit well when he was here. But other than that, you're really missing out on a place that can be very helpful in your lineup. And I agree with you. They do still have a number of number of boxes to check on that shopping list.
Yeah, if they go into opening day with this roster as is, I think you're going to have a lot of unhappy people, myself included, because as of right now, they will finish last in the division again based on what they have right now. There's just I just don't I'm not confident that they can beat anybody else in the division, especially when you see teams doing things too. Like, Toronto, they're getting better in the offseason. And you look at some of these other teams and it's like, well, what are they doing to actually compete with these teams? Because when it comes to the starting rotation, there's way too many question marks. Obviously, Chris Sale, it's unfortunate really what's happened to him the last few years and kind of what he's been through. Obviously, they didn't have that in mind when they signed him to that big extension. That was obviously all not in play at that point. But obviously, he by default is a question mark just because of what he's been through health wise. James Paxton, another one who isn't really like always healthy and for the majority of the time isn't. He's a question mark because he hasn't, pitched at all here yet. Garrett Whitlock, I think, is a question mark because I personally actually like him better in the bullpen than as a starter, but they want to make him a starter. So, we'll see what happens there. It's just the mix of people. Pivetta, I feel like is actually the least question mark out of everybody in the rotation right now. And I feel like that's a problem because obviously Pivetta has shown some inconsistency. And so overall, like if all is a perfect world and none of those people were question marks, it's not a bad rotation. But that's the problem is that like there's not really many pitchers in the rotation that you can confidently say like, okay, we can rely on this person. So I'm just interested to see what they do to address that. They keep saying they want to bring in another starting pitcher, but like when and who?
Yeah, most of the guys you just mentioned, they just haven't worked that often. They haven't pitched that often. If you go back the last 3 or 4 years, since the first half of 2018, Chris Sale's been in and out, has barely pitched for this team. James Paxton did not pitch at all last season and
People forgot he was on the team.
Yeah, and he hasn't necessarily been healthy in a long while. If you're going to ask Brian Bayo to make 30 starts, that's a big jump for a guy who would be in his first full season at that level.
He's another question mark too. Because of that reason.
Yeah, he is because of workload. I really like his talent, and I think ultimately they have a good pitcher there. But is he a guy who in 2023 is going to give you 180 innings? I don't know that. I don't necessarily – I'm not super confident in that. And the same with Whitlock. I think Whitlock is excellent. I agree with you. His role in the bullpen, he was superb and made that his own and was a guy who was unlike a lot of the relievers in that he attacked and threw strikes and was able to close hitters out. Last year they had too many guys who got behind and didn't have swing and miss stuff. And they got hurt because of that. All those blown saves were largely because they couldn't miss bats. And then they started to nibble and got themselves in a little bit of trouble. Whitlock was sort of like the anti that. He's a guy who's just straightforward as you see him, electric stuff, and he hits the strike zone routinely. And I understand they're trying to maximize his value in the starting rotation. I get it. I don't see them jumping him to 30 starts and 180 innings, not coming off 60 or 70 or whatever it was last year. That's a big leap. And I look at the guys toward the bottom, the swing guys like Seabold, like Crawford, like Winkowski. Crawford showed some promise, I thought. He probably had the best results out of that group.
Yeah, I agree.
But I don't necessarily want any of them starting even semi-routinely, even making 6, 7, 8 starts. I don't necessarily think you'd see those guys on a contender. Michael Wacha gave them a good year. He also hit the IL for the 6th time in his last 7 years. So could you rely on him if you brought him back? I don't know. Allegedly, they've been in contact with Nathan Eovaldi. He's the type of guy who would slot in 2 or 3, behind Sale if he's healthy. But you wonder if they'd give him a multi-year deal. If they'd go 2 with an option or 3 with an option. You wonder what his market would look like. He might get past the point where they are comfortable spending on him. Rich Hill's in his 40s. How much longer is Rich Hill going to be able to do this? He is incredible with the results that he gets at his age, and when you consider his career arc and how up and down it's been, being out of baseball and in independent leagues and coming back and, turning into a very good pitcher on World Series teams. It's so unlikely, his path. But you wonder, do you want to rely on Rich Hill for 25, 30 starts? I don't necessarily know if I do. So too many questions there in the rotation. You like to see them add from the top. I honestly thought that's a point where they could make a trade, try to get involved with someone like a Zach Gallen, a Brandon Woodruff, a Corbin Burns, guys who are coming up on arbitration or on free agency. I know the Brewers have said that they don't want to move either guy. Arizona's got some young pitching. Maybe you throw the bag at them for Gallen. Maybe throw in Ceddanne Rafaela and a couple other elite prospects, and you get 3 years of Gallen arbitration eligible, and you extend him for 3 more. You buy him out, and he's a relatively cheap, young stud starter who you could put at the top of your rotation. And that's just a for instance. I don't mean specifically him. But, I'm interested to know, and I know Bloom said earlier this week he's going to shift his focus to the trade market, which should start to pick up a little bit here. I'd be really interested to know the conversations that took place at the winter meetings and behind the scenes in the Red Sox baseball offices in terms of maybe parting with some of these prospects now and bringing in some proven major leaguers who could help.
Yeah, it's definitely, bothersome because as of right now, who do they consider to be their number one pitcher? Chris Sale. That's a concern in itself.
Yeah.
If Chris Sale right now, because obviously, Chris Sale from a few years ago, 100% was an ace and was a number one pitcher before he got injured and Tommy John and everything. The first half of 2018 he was really good. And it's like, that's the Chris Sale I think they were hoping that obviously they would still be getting. But the Chris Sale now is not a number one starter. He can't be that guy that you're like, yeah, he's our ace and like he's our number one guy. So that's why that alone should tell them that they need more starting pitching. And it's, I'm curious to know like if they've, who they've been in contact with for potential trades, because I haven't really seen much on that. I've seen, they're linked to so-and-so, they're interested in this person, but I don't really value that because usually they're interested in people and then it never happens. So it's like they could be interested all they want, but then they never get those people. So it's just like, I'd be curious to know, like, I wish I was there as like a fly in the wall, like just watching like these conversations and who Chaim Bloom is actually calling and talking to about certain players.
Well, it goes back to what we were talking about before about free agency. Are you really convinced that they are interested in a top player on the market who they could trade for?
No.
Are you
not unless action happens and they actually do something like that?
Right. Are you convinced that they are going to make a huge move for an elite player like a Pedro Martinez, like they did once upon a time?
Gosh,
no, it just goes so against what they've shown us over what is now an extended period of time. And so, yeah, I think eventually they'll probably add in some way, but I think it's going to be, less than what people expect. I just think that they've conditioned us to that point, where they just want to wait and see if their own guys pan out and, spend in the middle of the market and maybe make some trades on the periphery. But, in terms of making a splash or a blue chip upgrade in some way, I just don't think we've seen either enough connection to that or enough appetite to do something like that where we can rely on it going into the year.
Yeah, and it's upsetting because I feel like the Red Sox as an organization have, in the past, like told Red Sox fans, like, we want to win. And they've actually spent money on big market players to be able to put them in that situation. So Red Sox fans are, under the expectation that the Red Sox are going to be run like a big market team like they are, because that's how they've been in the past. And so you can't really blame people for getting frustrated with the way that the Red Sox seem to be doing things now, because we've been involved with a team and a franchise that, is a big market team and should be treated as such. And we've seen them do that. And that's kind of the precedent that's been set by the Red Sox organization. So when they start to treat it like this and do what they're trying to do here by, not being willing, it seems like, to go out and spend big money on players, then it's upsetting and it's frustrating for people. I mean, I know they added, a few bullpen pieces to hopefully help. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Because they did make some moves to try to address the bullpen.
Yeah, Kenley Jansen, which they just officially announced the Kenley Jansen signing. And they've designated Hoy Park for assignment. Kenley Jansen. That just had breaking news on the pod. Breaking news here at 1:45.
Even though they just got him, too. But
I like the fact that they've committed to an established closer. I think that's important. I think that sort of lets everybody else define their roles in the bullpen, and define roles help people perform better, whether it's in sports or in life. I think when you have that structure, it's really important in that way. It's very hard to live your life in limbo.
Throwing random people into the closing spot, it doesn't exactly work in games.
It's difficult because it upsets how you handle the last 12 outs, essentially. I mean, what do you do for the 6th inning, the 7th inning, the 8th inning? So Jansen's a proven guy, obviously. Tail end of his prime. Can you squeeze 2 more years out of him? He was good last year in Atlanta. Previously he's not the killer he was with the Dodgers, in the mid 2010s, but still a capable pitcher. Chris Martin is another guy who I thought was a pretty decent signing from the standpoint that he is a strike thrower and strikes people out. And as I said earlier about Whitlock, that's something that they lacked in the bullpen last year. Somebody who could finish people off, without hurting themselves. So I think you're going to see him in a high leverage role. You pair them with Schreiber, maybe Barnes if he's able to get his act together. Tanner Houck, if ultimately they put him in the back end. That's fairly decent. 4 guys, 5 guys. That's okay. Certainly better than it was last season. So
absolutely an upgrade from last year.
Yeah, so you do like to see progress in that way. But I think your larger point is a good one. This ownership group, after winning 4 World Series here, when you consider what happened leading up to that, I mean, I remember in '86 being a little kid, and my dad got me out of bed for the 9th inning of Game 6, and he said, "Come on out, watch Red Sox win the World Series." And the 10th inning of Game 6, and I'm playing t-ball at the time, and I watched the ground ball through Buckner's legs, and I'm like, "Oh no!" I'm like, and my dad basically said, "Welcome to being a Red Sox fan, kid. This is what it's like." Yeah. They're gonna break.
They were used to that at that point, yeah.
Yeah, so to see the ownership bring 4 World Series here, they should be unimpeachable at this point. They should be unassailable. I mean, what they've given us over 20 years should stand on its own. But it is interesting the way they've chosen to pivot here, since winning in 2018, and. I don't think they'll ever completely undo the good work that they've done, over 2 decades, but they're certainly putting some scuff marks on it. And they're really, they're leading the fan base in an interesting direction at this point that, maybe we did not anticipate and will not be satisfied with. This is a type of place that should be in on big players and should be in on stars. And, you look at what the Mets are doing and what San Diego is doing and what the Phillies are doing, teams who are already ahead of you, who are showing more ambition than you are, spending more than you are. It is disturbing in a sports fan way to see that. And, it leads to a lot of questions about what the Red Sox are really doing here. Are they looking to sell the team? Is John Henry looking to invest in maybe an expansion NBA franchise in Las Vegas? Is that why LeBron James was brought in? Because that would be a multi-billion-dollar property, of course. Yeah. Does he see more growth outside of baseball than inside of baseball? And he's looking to cash out. I think that's where a lot of those rumors come from. The fact that they are operating the team like this. Yes, they are spending, and they did go over the CBT last year. but they are not spending in the way that you might expect them to with long-term high-dollar commitments on stud players who are the best at their positions.
Yeah, I mean, definitely one thing I like about Kenley Jansen is that, he has that postseason experience and you kind of know what you're getting from him. Obviously, like you said, he's not the pitcher that he was with the Dodgers, which would be great if he was.
Yeah.
But, he still can get the job done. And he is a proven closer, which is what they needed. And people are like, he's on the older side, but, it's a 2-year deal. So I don't really mind. I don't mind the years that they gave him on that. He's somebody who can get it done in close games, because there were a lot of games last year that they ended up losing in the 9th inning because they didn't have a real closer, and it was just so frustrating to watch games like that where it was in the 9th inning and the Red Sox maybe were up by a run and you couldn't feel confident with who was coming in to pitch in that game. So at least that he's a solid 9th inning guy that you can go to in those 1-run games. And for the majority of the time, probably find that you can trust him to, get the job done in that game. So I actually, think that was a good signing on their part. I just think I'm trying to think how to say this. The whole situation is definitely a little bit confusing in terms of what they think they're going to accomplish from this. I don't know if they look at teams like the Rays and they're like, well, they are somehow a good team that makes the playoffs every year, but they don't spend as much. Or like what exactly they're trying to do, but it's just definitely upsetting because it almost feels like a slap in the face to all of us when we saw what happened with Xander, and then we're seeing how it seems like there's been no urgency when it comes to signing Devers either. And it's just overall the whole situation, they can afford these players, these big name players on the free agent market. They're just choosing to not spend their money that way. And it's really, really hard to go about things like that and find success that way. So I think the rest of this offseason is going to be really, really telling for kind of the future of how this organization is going to end up. And if they blow the Devers situation, I think they should sell the team. If they can't come up with a reason to give Devers the money that he deserves, then that's tough. That's a really bad look on the organization.
I mean, I think we've known for a long time what Devers' value is. He is in line to get a contract that is alongside Machado and Rendon and Arenado, and that is, well north of $200 million a year. Something that approaches $30 million AAV. And so for them to start at 8 for 168 and try to make a first base comp with Matt Olson, I thought was a tough look. And it goes back to, how I started off the pod, when we're talking about Bogaerts. It's just, why are you making an offer that is substandard for the market? Why would you do that? You're poisoning the well in that way. That's not, yes, it is business. The players are conditioned to accept it as such, but they're also humans, and you're going to leave some bad feelings there. And ultimately, if you get to the end and you have a number where the player might be convinced to take even a little less, you might have negated that chance with that early offer. The player might now be dug in and say, I'm not giving them one nickel of a discount. I'm getting the max at this point. And, I couldn't blame Devers for going to market right now. And I'd also be really scared if the Red Sox tried to trade him, because I understand that, the Betts return was weighed down by the price contract. I get it. But the Dodgers understood that they were paying $48 million to take on David Price, and they were getting a superstar who helped them win a World Series for the first time in 32 years, and that's Mookie Betts. And if they happen to win 2 or 3 more over the course of his 12-year deal, that $365 million takes care of itself. That's nothing for the Dodgers. They're billionaires. Guggenheim Partners can print their own money if they would like to. And I think it goes back to just understanding how rich baseball owners are, and the fact that we look at these numbers and they make our mouths water, and we say, my goodness, I can't imagine all that money. For owners, Fenway Sports Group's value, it's valued at $9 billion. Liberty Media, the owners of the Braves, they're valued at $10 billion. So you look at a payroll every year and it's $200 million. It's nothing for them when you take out the TV revenue, local and national, when you take out every $15 beer they sell at Fenway Park and every $50 you fork over to park and, every $150 you spend on a jersey, they're making all that back and more. So don't think for a second that, when these owners decide to let free agents walk, that they can't spend. They're choosing not to spend. The teams at the bottom of the sport, especially, are choosing not to spend. Someone like John Fisher in Oakland, he's a billionaire. He can spend whatever he wants in the A's. I'm not looking at him to take their payroll into, multiple hundreds of millions, but he could certainly get to 9 figures if you look at his regional TV and then his national TV and, the current sale of that BAMTech technology that netted every owner $30 million in terms of, geopositioning and whatever else. I mean, that's a windfall for them. They all should have been required to spend that this offseason. But I look at spending and the way that they view it. And, I go back to something that Tom Werner said in 2019 at the end of the year. We had a sort of informal press gathering on the suite level at Fenway. And the way it had worked out that year, the Rays had spent less than $1 million per win. The Red Sox had spent about $2.83 million per win. Wow. So Tom Henry said to us, we look at this. This was after Dave Dombrowski was fired. This was late September. He said, we look at this and we think to ourselves, there has to be a more efficient way to do this. And other teams have found it. And we would like to find, a little more efficient way of using our resources, which I think is a noble goal. And certainly you don't want to waste money, under the CBT or on a player who's not going to be productive, like a Pablo Sandoval contract or a Carl Crawford contract or whatever it may be. But the fact is the Red Sox can afford those mistakes. They can afford to waste some money on the margins. They can afford to spend a little more per win than the Rays could or Toronto could or, Baltimore can, somebody along those lines. And the fact is that right now they seem to be trying to find a way to middle this, to sort of have no dead money on the books, to only spend good cash on, players who will return the full value of the contract. And I don't think that that's necessarily an achievable goal. And I understand you're running a corporation, you want to cut waste and all that. But I think part of winning in sports is, you're going to overpay every once in a while. You're going to overpay. You're going to go to a place in the market where you're very uncomfortable. But ultimately, those players are going to perform and deliver you further riches that you can't even calculate.
Yeah, because if that turns into a World Series championship, then at the end of the day, you did what you needed to do anyway. So that extra money is like, okay, like, we won a World Series out of it. So we did what we needed to do to actually win. And I think that's the mindset they need to have. Do you think that Chaim Bloom is, an equal part of the problem as ownership? Or do you think that it's more of an ownership problem and he's just kind of going along with what ownership says when they said, we don't want you to spend money here? Because there's definitely conflicting thoughts on that I've seen on Red Sox Twitter in terms of how much blame is being put on him and how much responsibility is being put on him, because he does definitely deserve some of the responsibility here too.
Yeah, I think the huge money contracts are definitely ownership level. Something like Bogaerts, that's an ownership level negotiation. What I would say in Bloom's, sort of like under his tent of responsibility, I would say if I was Chaim Bloom and ownership said, we want you to offer Xander 4 for $90 in spring training, I think Bloom at that point should say, guys, with all due respect, I think that's a terrible idea. And we shouldn't do that because news of that is going to leak out and we're just going to poison the negotiations with the player. We have no chance of signing him for 4 for $90. Or even 4 for $120 or whatever it may be. There is no chance of that happening. Like you go back to John Lester. John Lester is not taking 4 for $70. Someone had to step in and say to Larry Lucchino, Larry, that is a terrible idea. Do not do that. Offer him anything else, literally anything, but don't do that. because you're going to drive him one step out of town. So in that respect, I'd like to see, maybe Bloom be a little more assertive, maybe, and I don't know if he has or if he hasn't behind the scenes, but, go back at ownership and say, look, this is more the fair market. Where are we prepared to operate here? If it's in the lower part or the middle part of the market, okay, I'll try to make it work. But if it is in the upper crust of the market and, you have to go to fans and say, we're going to trade all our superstars now, and there's never going to be another retired number up there. And, we are not going to be involved on the best free agents or the best players on the trade market. I'd like you, Tom Werner and John Henry, to communicate that very clearly for me because I'm working on your behalf, and I understand I take the slings and arrows and all that stuff, but he's put in a very difficult situation in that way. I do put the trade return for Betts on him. I do put the Renfroe right field situation on him. I do put the first base problems on him, the sort of waiting for Casas. Now if we get to shortstop and it's waiting for Meyer,
that's going to be disappointing too.
This isn't a market where you wait. It is not. You do not just punt 2 years at a position because you have what you think is a premium prospect. Development is not a linear process. You're taking for granted that Meyer isn't going to have setbacks at higher levels, that he's not going to have injuries, that he's not going to have off-field problems with a partner or with a family member or in business in some way that could sidetrack him. There are so many steps between being a 20-year-old top 20 prospect in the game and actually breaking through and becoming an all-star in the big leagues. You go back to Swanson, who we mentioned earlier. Swanson's the #1 pick in the draft. Can't miss, Vanderbilt guy, huge pedigree, by all accounts, good character guy behind the scenes. It took him time to become this player who's coveted in free agency, who's a World Series champion in Atlanta. I just don't think that in this market, you don't need to be, sort of held back by taking that time. I think there are other ways to do things if you are willing to be aggressive and a little more creative. So I put that sort of stuff on Bloom, not necessarily, the fact that they lost Bogaerts to the Padres for 11 for 280. I don't put that on him.
That's definitely an ownership problem. Yeah,
that's an ownership issue. Betts is an ownership issue. If they don't offer Devers, 10 to 12 years for, something like 27, 28 million annually, that's an ownership issue. What I would put on Bloom is if he did trade Devers and got a substandard return, a third outfielder in someone like Verdugo, a prospect who is on really shaky ground right now in Jeter Downs, and a catcher who profiles as maybe a timeshare or backup type guy in Connor Wong. You needed to get at least one impact player back. Wong is the fourth catcher in their system. Someone like Downs is behind Gavin Lux in terms of their infielders. Verdugo in that 2020 outfield was going to be behind multiple players. I won't say that he was surplus for the Dodgers, but he was certainly somebody who they were willing to part with. And so in that respect, I do put it on Bloom. They didn't drive a hard enough bargain in that way. And I would hope if it does come to the point where they do have to trade Rafael Devers, that he puts the acquiring team to the screws. Because otherwise, there's really no other way that you could say that he's maximized that situation.
Yeah, with Mookie, it's like you can't give up somebody of that caliber talent and get the underwhelming return that you got. Like and it needs to happen with Devers. If they trade Devers, they need to get like at least one like proven MLB caliber player back in that because his talent is too good not to. And so, yeah, and I think even, the bullpen issues not improving the bullpen after 2021 going into 2022, I think that's a Bloom issue also because he definitely had opportunities, I think, to try to bring in people who could help that bullpen, and he just didn't. And so I think he's very much of because I think he was kind of like this in Tampa too, very much of we'll just see what happens. Like, let's just, if they make the decision of let's just move Story back to shortstop because he can be good there until Meyer comes up. he's very much of that type of guy in terms of like, yeah, like we'll wait and we'll like, because Meyer we think is going to be a star at the position. But that's the other thing too, is like, you think that's the whole thing with prospects too. Like, you don't know for sure how they're going to pan out either. So you're kind of taking a bigger risk by waiting for somebody like that. And if they work out, that's fantastic. But if they don't, then you really kind of looked bad by waiting for somebody like that to just have them not pan out. So I do think he puts a lot of value in the prospects, which is good, and in the farm system, but there needs to be equal value put into the major league team that's out there playing right now. And I don't know how much they care about that. So I think the rest of this offseason is really going to say that and send that message.
I think Bloom and the front office, I think they really believe that they can identify talent, and they certainly have in certain respects. I mean, Schreiber was the type of guy who, was just on the fringes in Detroit and was never part of their plans, and ultimately is a big bullpen piece here. But he missed on Diekman. Matt Stram was okay, but he's not going to bowl anybody over in the postseason necessarily. Waka was a hit, certainly. But he's that's sort of that area where you're operating with imperfect solutions. You do that when you're a small market team. Yeah. Not to say that there's ever a perfect solution, but you can get a lot closer to it. You can lessen your variance a lot more by spending with a big market team. And Boston affords you the opportunity to do that. When you find out, and this was great reporting by Jen McCaffrey of The Athletic, when you lose Tommy Kahnle over $500,000, if you really wanted Tommy Kahnle in your bullpen and your payroll is going to be $200 million, what percentage of $200 million is $500,000? It's infinitesimal, right? Yeah. Are you going to lose out on someone like Zach Eflin, who you clearly wanted? You offered 3 for $40. You got leveraged by the Rays. He took your offer to the Rays and said, "Will you match this? I'd like to pitch closer to home." And the Rays said, "Yes, we will match this." Normally, in the past, players would negotiate elsewhere and then go to the big market team and say, "Hey, I have this offer from the Rays. Give me a few million more and I'll come pitch for you." And you'll say, "Sure, no problem. Here's 3 for 48. Or here's 3 for 45. Let's give it a try, Zach." So I think when you hear a lot, the interest kings and all that stuff.
It's true, though.
It's frustrating when that goes public. But you just want them to extend just that little extra. If you really want the player and you really are interested in the player and you think the player can make you better, in Boston, you have the luxury of going that little extra. It's okay to do that. You don't need to settle for your second or maybe third choice. And I think, maybe over the last couple of years, those have been some hard lessons in certain areas. And they culminate in them finishing in last place last year and coming into what was, really a critical offseason this year.
Yeah, it's just frustrating, the whole feeling like they come in second all the time when it comes to certain players, and just losing out to other teams when they very clearly are capable of paying players. So it's definitely frustrating. Hopefully they, start to make me less frustrated and more optimistic as the postseason goes, or as the offseason goes on. But I, as of right now, am not, because they haven't done anything to show me that I should be optimistic. So hopefully they, hopefully they start to be more aggressive, because things have been awfully quiet since the Bogaerts situation on the Red Sox front. So.
Yeah, it's very much, that 2 steps forward and 1 step back that they've done. And that Wednesday, obviously, where, the news comes out that they got Martin earlier in the week, Jansen, Yoshida, you're thinking, okay, they're making external additions. They are upgrading the talent level on this team. And then they followed up by losing Bogaerts on the same day. And all that goodwill is just, it hits a wall. And similar last year at the trade deadline, when you had, you acquire Tommy Pham, who's a right-handed bat who you felt like you should have had all year to platoon in the outfield. You acquire Eric Hosmer, who, certainly the Padres wanted to get rid of after they traded for Josh Bell. And, you essentially got him for nothing. It's just a minimum. But you turn around and trade Christian Vasquez, which really, you can debate his value as much as you want, but really hurt some guys in that clubhouse and made them question, are we going to be better with Reese McGuire and Connor Wong than we were with Christian Vasquez? A guy who has won the World Series here a guy who these pitchers trust throwing to. So I think that sort of, that counterbalance that they're trying to strike and seemingly constantly, where they make a little progress and then they hurt themselves purposely in a way, that is very difficult to square, I think, if you're a fan. And the amount of grumbling that we heard over the last 2 months last year out of Clubhouse, more than we have before, I think it was difficult for some of those players to square as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And then Vasquez, who, just went and won a World Series again, which I'm obviously very happy for him. I think when he found out he got traded, that was really tough for him because he loved Boston. Now he just signed with the Twins. So, that's another catcher that's off the market. So we'll see. But I think there's still a lot more checks that need to be checked off, like a lot more boxes that they have to go through on their list to check off. And they're not really showing the urgency to actually fill all those boxes. So they need to have a really busy rest of the offseason if they want to kind of, make up for what's been going on the last couple of weeks, really.
Yeah, they still have time. Murphy obviously is the biggest trade domino, I think, to fall so far. If you look into the offseason, and you have to think that there will be more movement in that market. You just hope that the Red Sox are not only linked to certain players, but that they are players who clearly upgrade their roster. And, I think that's all people really want is for this team to acquire talent, that is clearly meant for them to contend immediately. I think people just want to see ambition out of this team. They want to see something commensurate with, being fans of a big market team. I don't think that's too much to ask. And it's certainly the way that Boston has operated previously. And it is difficult to watch them sort of shift gears here and not necessarily do that anymore.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely upsetting. And it's definitely kind of just a slap in the face to all of us, if I could kind of describe the feeling. But we'll see if they can kind of wake up and start to make some moves. Hopefully the Bogaerts situation kind of changes their mindset a little bit in terms of how they might have initially approached this offseason. So we'll see what happens there. But I really, really appreciate you joining me on the show.
No, anytime, Gabby. It's my pleasure. I mean, it's sports. We get to talk about sports. It's the greatest job in the world, So I look forward to any chance I have to do that.
Yeah, exactly. I always say, like, I could talk about sports all day, every day. So it's definitely nice to be able to talk about it. But I appreciate you hopping on. I will certainly be in touch to have you on again. And obviously we'll be following your tweets and all of that, and seeing what your thoughts are as this all unfolds for the rest of this offseason for the Red Sox.
Yeah, you can find me at Bill Koch 25 on Twitter, ProvidenceJournal.com. On the sports page there. My work is not hiding. It's out there. My thoughts are out there for all to see, good or bad, good takes or lousy ones. They are there, and I own them all.
Well, no, that's awesome. I think you do a great job. So
thank you.
Definitely appreciate you hopping on. I hope you have, a great rest of your week. Everybody else, I hope you have a great rest of the week as well. And we'll see what the Red Sox do. Thanks so much for tuning into the show as always. And I will catch you all next time.